Hey, it's Nick here with Cottage Family Adventures, and today we're going to learn how to throw a cast net.
Alrighty, we were back in Pennsylvania last week with Jordan and I's family celebrating the 4th of July. Got to eat a lot of good grub, throw some horseshoes, and we got to set some fireworks off.
Got the good stuff here. No one knows I'm getting ready to light this right now, so we'll light that off and wake them up.
We started off the show with our little bottle rockets, firecrackers and stuff.
Quick fuse.
Then it was time for the big boys.
Ready? Go.
We spent the rest of the night sitting around the campfire, relaxing, roasting some marshmallows, and getting caught up with family. We had a great time celebrating America's birthday, thanking God for all the freedoms we have, and getting caught up with our Pennsylvania family. We don't get to see that often. Alrighty, now it's time to learn how to throw this cast net. Now, this is a 5-foot net. It only costs about $30, so it's very affordable to get started off with this. So if you're worried about price, don't let that keep you from doing this.
So the single most important thing with throwing a cast net is making sure you have it set up properly. I noticed whenever I was going through my multitude of errors before, most of those upon reviewing the camera footage was because I wasn't setting the net up properly. So I'd say that's probably the most important part. So what we do here first is we grab the rope here, which is called the leash. And some of them will have a Velcro strap you can put around your wrist. Some of them just have this little hole inside of them. The hole, you just feed back the rope through the loop. You just shove your wrist right in there and tie it tight. And once you get the leash put together, then we're gonna wanna go ahead and loop the leash up in an orderly fashion. I usually do 1 arm length here. And we'll keep looping it up. Make sure it's nice and neat. Once you run out of loop, the next thing to do is to grab the horn of the net, which is this plastic disc right here. We're going to put that in our hand next. And after that, we're going to go ahead and check to make sure none of our weights are tangled up. So we're just going to stretch it along and make sure there's just 2 rows the whole length of the net. If we get 3 rows or 4 rows together, that's our indication that we got something tangled up and goofy. But looks like we're all untangled here. So once we do that, the next step is we're going to go down, follow the length of the net to we're about waist height, and then we're going to loop that up and grab that back in our throwing hand with the rest of the stuff. And then we're going to stretch out the weights, still making sure there's no tangles, just 2 rows of weights. We're going to get about half of them up here, then we're going to loop those, make sure the weights are facing out away from you there. You get those in our other hand. Then we're going to go down. For this 5-foot net, I just go down 5 weights and that's enough. Then we're going to start to open it up, loop that out, grab that also in our throwing hand, and then in our non-throwing hand we'll go down to our waist, grab that, and that's pretty much the setup for it. Then when we go to throw it, the big concentration is to get the rotation of the net whipping around to start to open it up. So our throwing hand, we're going to whip it around like we're throwing a haymaker. And with our non-throwing hand, we're gonna keep that anchored until the net is opened up, and then we're gonna use that to get a counter rotation going on with the back side of the net. So, that being said, that's how you throw a 10-foot cast net.
And let's go through that again.
Alrighty, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our leash. Some of them will have like a Velcro strap you can put around your wrist. This one just has a loop built into it. So what I do to make sure I get it good and tight so it doesn't slip off is take this loop here, take the body of the leash, send it back through, then you just shove your wrist in there and tighten it up. That ain't gonna come off of there. Alrighty, get one arm length here. Make sure you keep your loops nice and neat. The idea here is to keep this coming out, so whenever it comes out, it all comes out at once in a clean line. It doesn't get tangled up with itself. That's the whole point of being so neat, because this setup is critical to getting your cast net out without getting all of the tangles that you can see from some of my beginning casts there. So once we got that on there, we got our leash all nice and neatly organized on our wrists. We're going to take the horn here, we're going to put that in our throwing hand as well, and then we're going to make sure there's no tangles up here. And just as long as you're seeing those 2 rows and you're not seeing 3 or 4, then you know you got no tangles. So this one is nice and neat here. Get a little bit of a tangle in the end there, just bounce it out. And if it doesn't bounce out, then you could tend it through. Yep, there we go. Now we got all the tangles out. So that's what I tell people, if you are ever having trouble getting it to open up the whole way and your throwing technique is good, one of the most common mistakes that there are out there that'll keep you from being able to open it up is not having it set up properly, and also not having it completely untangled. Alrighty, so after we get the horn in our one hand, we're gonna go follow the net down with our hand about waist height. Then we're gonna take that and loop it out and stack that up in our throwing hand as well. And then we're going to take, for this 5-foot net, about half our weights will be fine, third to half. We're gonna make sure we're just sticking with those 2 rows there. Don't want any more than that. If there's more than 2 rows, that means we have a tangle in our net. So we're gonna take those weights, stack that up in our throwing hand as well. And then the last step before we throw it, so we're gonna count down 3 or 4 weights, and we're gonna get that opened up. So we're starting to help the net open up, and we're gonna pinch that in our throwing hand. Then we're gonna take some weights. I usually just go down to my waist and just grab it down by the waist. And we're gonna take that in our non-throwing hand. And now our net is set up and ready to throw. So once we see our school of bait fish out there, we're gonna aim for them and make sure when we throw, we're throwing down. Because one thing that happens if you throw too high or straight out is your net is gonna open up the whole way and then start to close before it hits the water, as you can see in this video here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come across with a haymaker motion on our throwing hand. And while we're coming across with that, we're gonna hold on with our non-throwing hand until that net is out of our throwing hand. And then we're gonna use that to throw it back around. They say the shorter the net you have, the more exaggerated that throwing motion is with your non-throwing hand to give it that counter spin. They say with larger nets, like your 8-10 foot nets, so bigger than this one, it's more of just a matter of holding on to it with your non-throwing hand, whereas it's a smaller net, you're gonna have a more exaggerated motion to get that net to fully open up. So anyway, we got her set up, and now we're gonna throw. We're gonna aim that clover right over there. I'd say we would have had it.
And one final time.
So we're gonna make sure that we got the leash anchored around our wrist on our throwing hand. So if you're left-handed, all this is gonna be opposite. So again, get an arm length, start to loop the rope around, get your leash put together in a nice orderly fashion to keep it from tangling up as you're throwing it. Then once we're out of leash, we're gonna take that horn and we're gonna also put that in our throwing hand here. And we're gonna verify that there's no tangles. Go down the whole length of the net. So there's no tangles, so we're gonna go ahead and go follow the net down to about waist height. And then you're gonna loop that up, put that in your throwing hand as well. And we're gonna go about half of the weights here. For this 5-foot net, half the weights is more than enough. Get that in our throwing hand as well. And we're gonna go down 4 weights and start to open that net up. Put that in our throwing hand, and we're going to go down to about waist height with our non-throwing hand, and that is the setup. So as you can see, I'm going to come across with my throwing hand first, keeping this non-throwing hand anchored, and as I release the net and it starts to open up, the non-throwing hand is going to whip around and start to get that rotation in so it fully opens up. And one trick to save time whenever you're throwing this in the water and you're wanting to get it reset is, as you're pulling the net in, you can just go ahead and get your leash looped up as you're pulling the net in full of fish, hopefully. Also, once you're starting to throw this outside of I'd say this is a pretty sterile environment, no sticks or twigs or seaweed or nothing. But if you're throwing it out in the lake or the sticks or rocks, make sure as you're getting your net set up, you're pulling the twigs out, because that could also keep it bunched up, keep it from opening up the whole way. Alrighty, we got a couple good throws in there. I tried as I was going through to teach you all some of the main mistake areas that were plaguing me whenever I was first learning, that I didn't really see covered in too much detail in any of the videos I was watching. Just learned that kind of through trial and error. So hopefully you can avoid that, and instead of taking 1,000 throws to figure it out, maybe you could do it in a couple dozen. But anyway, the real test of whether my teaching method is effective or not is we're going to find someone in my family who's never thrown a cast net before and see if we could go ahead and teach them here. So let's go see if we could find a volunteer. Alrighty, so I found a volunteer. My dad has graciously volunteered to be my test subject here. So Dad, I was telling everyone, the most important thing with throwing a cast net is making sure that you have the net set up properly, because if you don't do that, it's going to get tangled up and you're going to be starting off on a bad foot before you even get started. So that being said, let's get into it here. So you're going to want to grab that black rope, that's called your leash, and stick your wrist right in the middle of that and tighten it up. You're going to get about an arm's length of loop and just coil it up. Take this orange ring here called the horn, and you're going to put that in your throwing hand as well. You're going to run your non-throwing hand about down to waist height, and you're going to loop that up, weights facing you. Gather the net in your hands like this until you got about a third to half of the weights in your hand. Stack those up, but weights facing away from you now. And now you're going to help the net open up by counting down 3 or 4, and then pinch it in your throwing hand. Now count down about 4 in your non-throwing hand. Now the net is set up, so you're basically going to come across like you're making a haymaker, keeping that non-throwing hand planted. As soon as your throwing hand releases it, you're going to throw it back with your non-throwing hand and try to get that full rotation going to open it up.
Kind of start the spin.
Yeah.
Okay, got it, I think.
Alrighty. Not sure what to expect here, but we're not going to get perfection the first shot. Why don't you just aim just right there on that clover right there. This little bunch right here.
All right.
We'll see what we get going on here. Kind of opened up.
Yeah, I felt it dragging on my hand.
Pretty good.
Better.
Getting better. But that one, you threw it up, you could tell, because it opened up and it started to close before it hit the ground. A little arc. Aim at your target.
That was it.
That was it. We would have caught a school of bait fish with that one. So hey, not too bad of a teacher. 4 throws to get it. And obviously it wasn't perfectly opened up, but that's about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way opened up, and that's more than enough to catch some bait fish.
I got a D out of it.
I would say C+. Maybe B-. Definitely a B-. All right, we hope you all enjoyed this video. If you have any advice or anything you see we did wrong that we could have done differently, please leave a comment below. We'll see y'all next time. So I've heard it said you can never fit your net back into the same container in which it came. Well, here I am to prove you naysayers wrong. Looks like it fits to me. Yeah, I got it.
Da da da. Da da.